He walked into the room and said almost nothing. You watched him, everybody did, not because he was loud, not because he demanded it. He just sat down, and without a single word, without a single rehearsed gesture, something in the room shifted. Men who had been talking stopped. Women who had been ignoring the door looked up. The air itself seemed to reorganize around him. You told yourself it was money, told yourself it was status, told yourself it was luck or bone structure or confidence that some men are just born with. That is the lie. What you witnessed was not charisma. It was not charm. It was a discipline so ancient, so carefully practiced, so rarely spoken about in plain language, that most men spend their entire lives in rooms where this is happening to them, and they never once understand the mechanism. He read the room before he entered it. He read every person in it within the first 3 minutes. He knew the power dynamics, the insecurities, the hidden agendas, the hunger each person carried beneath their social surface before anyone shook his hand. And because he knew all of that, he was untouchable. Not because he was invulnerable, because he was never surprised. The ability to read a human being accurately, rapidly, without ego clouding the lens is not a gift. It is a technology, one of the oldest on Earth, and the men who mastered it did not get rich and powerful because they were lucky. They got rich and powerful because they were never in the dark about what they were dealing with. Today, you learn that technology. You were taught that reading people is intuition, a feeling, something some people have and others don't. That is a comfortable story for the people who have never studied it, and it keeps you permanently dependent on accident, on the hope that your gut instinct happens to be right, that your first impression is accurate, that the person smiling at you is not already calculating the distance between your weakness and their next move. The man who reads the terrain before he crosses it does not stumble. He moves with terrifying confidence because he already knows where the ground gives way. Modern neuroscience has spent decades confirming what Bacon intuited and what ancient practitioners knew for centuries. Human beings leak. Constantly. The body tells the truth the mouth conceals. Micro-expressions, involuntary flickers of emotion that cross the face in fractions of a second, were documented rigorously by psychologist Paul Ekman after studying thousands of subjects across cultures. His conclusion was unambiguous. Emotion cannot be fully masked. This is not magic. This is biology. You have been working without this. Walking into negotiations, relationships, boardrooms, and conversations blind. Reading facial expressions wrong. Missing signals that were screaming. Trusting the wrong people because you were reading their performance, not their reality. That ends here. Every person you will ever meet is wearing a mask, not as deception necessarily, as survival. From childhood, the human animal learns which parts of itself are acceptable and which must be hidden to maintain belonging, status, and safety. This is what Carl Jung called the persona, the carefully constructed social face that protects the interior. But the mask is always imperfect, and the cracks are where the truth lives. The first thing you train yourself to see is not what people say, not even what they do. It is the gap between the two. The man who speaks calmly but grips his glass until his knuckles whiten. The woman who laughs at your joke but whose eyes don't change. The colleague who claims to support your project in the meeting and goes quiet when you look at him directly. The gap. Always the gap. Your practical weapon here is silence. Not the silence of someone who has nothing to say, the silence of someone who is watching. Most people are so uncomfortable with quiet space that they fill it immediately. And what they fill it with is revelation. Ask a question, then stop talking. Let the silence grow. What emerges in that space, the nervous laugh, the deflection, the sudden oversharing, the careful overcontrol, is worth more than 10 minutes of conversation. Watch what a man does when he thinks no one important is watching. That is who he is. At the bottom of every human heart lies a hunger. Find the hunger, own the conversation. Schopenhauer believed that human beings are driven by a blind, insatiable will, an unconscious force he called will, that expresses itself as desire, ambition, fear, and craving, dressed up in the language of reason and morality. He was not being cynical. He was being precise. Every person you encounter is organized around a central desire they will almost never state plainly. Sometimes they do not know it themselves. Your task, within the first 3 minutes of any interaction, is to identify what that desire is. It falls into one of 6 categories: status, security, significance, connection, freedom, revenge. The status seeker drops names and titles within minutes, watches your eyes to see if you're impressed, positions himself relative to hierarchy constantly. The security seeker hedges every statement, qualifies, talks about risk management, about stability, about what could go wrong. His body language contracts. The significance seeker needs to be the most interesting person in the room, interrupts, escalates stories, feels the energy drop when attention shifts elsewhere. The connection seeker mirrors you immediately, finds shared ground, wants to be liked before any transaction occurs. The freedom seeker resists structure, bristles at authority, uses language about independence and authenticity while often being bound by the very things he claims to reject. The revenge seeker is the most dangerous and the most invisible. He appears rational, productive, helpful even, but beneath everything he does is an old wound, and everything he builds is pointed at someone who told him he couldn't. Find the hunger, everything else is theater. The body never lies, Martha Graham. Here is something neuroscience has confirmed that ancient practitioners already knew. The body makes decisions before the conscious mind does. Neuroscientist Benjamin Libet demonstrated in his famous experiments that neural activity precedes conscious awareness of intention by nearly half a second. Meaning, the body knows what it's going to do before the person knows they've decided. This is why the body is the most reliable text you will ever read. Train your eye on 7 zones of the body. The face, specifically the eyes, the jaw, and the area around the mouth. The hands, palms up signals openness, palms down signals control or concealment. The feet, the most honest part of the human body because no one remembers to manage them. The feet point toward what the person actually wants and away from what they want to escape. The throat, swallowing, clearing, touching the neck all signal anxiety. The chest expanded means dominance, contracted means defense. The timing of all of it, the speed of a response, the duration of eye contact, the rhythm of breath. You are not looking for one signal. You are looking for clusters. A single gesture means nothing. 3 converging signals in 3 seconds mean everything. This is not art, it is forensics. Read the body. The mouth will tell you what they want you to hear. The body will tell you what is true. Know thyself, and through thyself know others. Inscription at the Oracle of Delphi. Here is where most men fail in the reading of others, and it is the failure they will never admit. They are not reading the other person. They are projecting themselves. The man who trusts too quickly assumes others are as open as he is. The man who is paranoid assumes everyone is scheming because he knows his own capacity for scheming. The ambitious man reads every person through the lens of ambition and misses the one who is simply frightened. Carl Jung called this projection, the unconscious transfer of one's own psychological contents onto another person. And it is the single greatest distortion in human perception. It is the reason brilliant men miss obvious deceptions. The reason kind men are consistently used. The reason suspicious men lose allies they never needed to lose. The Delphic oracle's command, "Know thyself," was not a self-help instruction. It was a strategic one, because you cannot accurately read another person until you have mapped your own biases, your own blind spots, your own desires that color what you see. The lens through which you observe must be cleaned first. You are not trying to become a perfect observer of others. You are becoming a precise observer of yourself, so that what you see in the room in front of you is the room, not your reflection. The cleanest mirror shows the truest image. Speech is silver, silence is gold. Thomas Carlyle. The men who read rooms fastest are, almost without exception, the quietest men in them. This is counterintuitive to how most men have been socialized. You were taught that presence means talking. That intelligence means having an answer. That status means controlling the conversation. These assumptions cost you every single day. The man who speaks least in a room of powerful people holds all the information. Everyone else has revealed their hand, their need for approval, their nervousness, their agenda, their depth or lack of it. The quiet man has revealed nothing. He has watched everything. And when he finally speaks, the room stops because his words arrive with the weight of observation behind them. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that he had learned more from listening than from speaking, that the rush to talk signals inner instability, a need to be seen that a disciplined mind should not require. Aurelius governed one of the largest empires in history from a position of studied quiet. He asked more questions than he answered, and then he moved with precision. Your practical weapon: ask one precise question and then go silent, not a surface question. A question aimed at the heart of what you want to know. Then wait. The discomfort of silence will do more work than another hour of conversation. Silence is not absence. It is pressure. And the man who can hold pressure without flinching, who can sit in the quiet while another person unravels, has a weapon that cannot be bought or borrowed. The loudest man in the room is the most legible. The quietest is the most dangerous. He who cannot obey himself will be commanded. Friedrich Nietzsche. Here is the identity shift, not a technique, not a skill set, who you fundamentally are in relation to the people around you. Most men read people from a position of need. They want to know if the person likes them, if they're being judged, if they're making the right impression. And this need, this hunger for the room's approval, is the very thing that blinds them to what the room is actually doing. The sovereign reader has no such need. He is not in the room to be seen. He is in the room to see. His reading is not contaminated by self-consciousness because his self is not on trial. He has already passed his own trial, internally, privately, in the crucible of his own psychological work. And what the room thinks of him is data, not verdict. Epictetus, who was born into slavery and achieved a freedom of mind his masters never possessed, distinguished between what is up to us and what is not. The opinions of others not up to us. Our own clarity, our own judgment, our own capacity to perceive entirely up to us. The sovereign reader lives entirely in the first category. He has evacuated the second. You are not trying to become a better people pleaser with more sophisticated tools. You are becoming the kind of man for whom other people's psychology is landscape. Terrain he understands and moves through, not ocean he drowns in. You are not trying to change what you do. You are deciding who you are. A man who reads without needing the reading to flatter him. A man who sees without needing to be seen. A man who moves through the full complexity of human nature, the manipulation, the hunger, the fear, the performance, and remains at his core unshaken. That is sovereignty, and sovereignty cannot be purchased. It can only be forged. The man on the other side. There is a version of you on the other side of this practice, and you will recognize him not by what he has, but by how he moves. He enters rooms without scanning for approval. His eyes are calm because they are busy, reading, mapping, understanding, not performing. He knows within 3 minutes who in the room is afraid, who is hungry, who is performing strength they don't possess, and who is the real axis of power regardless of title. He says very little. What he says lands. He does not need people to tell him what they think of him because he already knows what they think, and more importantly, he knows why. People trust him without knowing why they trust him. What they feel is the rare experience of being genuinely seen by a man who sees everything and judges nothing because he needs nothing. That man is not cold, he is free. Be memento mori. Seneca, who served the most dangerous emperor in Roman history, who lost everything, was exiled, was recalled, and ultimately chose death with more dignity than most men manage life, wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. But he also wrote this: we lose our days while waiting for more time. Every room you enter between now and your last day is a room full of information you can either read or miss. Every conversation is an opportunity to see clearly or to remain in the fog of your own assumptions. Every relationship you have built on misread signals costs you in ways you may never fully calculate. The clock moves regardless. Time is the only resource that does not replenish. The man who waits until he is comfortable to begin this work will not begin it. The man who is willing to be uncomfortable, to sit in silence when every instinct says fill the space, to see what is real rather than what is convenient, that man builds something that compounds. Year after year, conversation after conversation, until the reading becomes automatic, until sovereignty is not something he practices, but something he is. Begin now, not tomorrow, not when life is calmer, now. What was laid out today, the 6 desires, the body's 7 zones, the mirror protocol, the silence weapon, this is the architecture, the public framework. The application, the specific drills, the unfiltered psychological frameworks, the case studies of how this has been used by the men who actually climb to the top of rooms you've only read about. That work happens behind the join button. The content there is not designed for everyone. It is designed for the man who already knows he is not everyone. Most people will watch this and feel the truth of it. They will mean to act on it. They will return to their lives and change nothing. Most won't, that's the point. If you are not subscribed, do that now. Not as a gesture, as a commitment to the version of yourself that is already waiting on the other side of this work.